All right, everybody, welcome back into another XRP pod. We're going to dive in, of course, with Dom and Phil again, coming over from EasyA. And you guys know this group right here. How are you?
Really well.
Doing
Thank you
really
very
well,
much for
Paul.
having us on again, Paul.
All right, so on the pre-show, you said London, which is there for the Digital Asset Summit. Phil, let's start with you. Is there anything that you've had a chance to see that you're like, hey, this is very intriguing, something you didn't expect?
Oh yeah, well I can kick it off very easily with House of Lords. So we got in just just on Tuesday. The next day we were having dinner at the House of Lords.
Okay.
And for anybody who doesn't know what the House of Lords is in the UK, basically lawmakers sit in these houses of Parliament. So they're the ones that you'll see with Big Ben. Really, really cool place. And we were invited to have dinner at the House of Lords, which is essentially where all the lords and the baronesses sit. They are people who are reviewing different legislation, they are debating it. And we were joined that evening by a number of lords, a number of baronesses, and also MPs, so members of parliament. They are
Interesting.
the typical elected politicians that people are. These people are making laws as well themselves and in charge of the day-to-day governance of the UK. And so we were sitting with them, and it was amazing to see that the reason we were invited is because they wanted to get the top crypto people to tell them about how blockchain works, what it's all about, why it's so important. And so, just to kick it off, this trip has been off to an absolutely wild start. It was crazy to be in there. I'll tell you, this was like a maximum security place. We had to I was going to say take off everything as we got in through security, but not quite everything. But they were pretty thorough, I'd say. And yeah, it was amazing just to be able to be in that room talking with the highest people in the land and educating them on blockchain.
Interesting. Dom, when you could you up that? Can you top that one?
I think that was pretty much the highlight of the week so far. I mean, we grew up as kids watching that on TV and seeing everyone with with all those costumes and outfits and those chairs, and to actually be there, talking about crypto, talking about the different companies
It's
that we
surreal,
work with
man.
as well is really cool. So yeah, we never imagined we'd be there one day. So yeah, excited for them as well to be interested in crypto and to be inviting young entrepreneurs like ourselves to actually talk about it and learn about it. And obviously, just a couple of weeks back, we were with the SEC Crypto Task Force as well, meeting with them, talking about crypto again, and how we can really make good regulations that actually foster innovation as opposed to clamp down on it. And I think that's just the broader macro trend that we're seeing towards crypto adoption and acceptance amongst these sort of traditionally very conservative institutions.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're seeing more of it, obviously, here in the States, but I think also abroad, if you just look at what's going on in the Middle East, even Asia to a certain extent. We'll talk about Japan today. We're also going to get into Ripple's recent acquisitions. I think there's a strategic play that is underway, so you guys stick around for all that. Dom and Phil, okay, I'm going to jump over to your website real quick. I'm going to bring it up. But you said that you had a new app launching, is that right? Or a new component launching?
Yep, that's
All right.
right.
Well,
So,
tell me about it.
yeah, for a lot of people on Twitter, they will have been seeing us talk a little bit about EasyA Labs. It's been pretty mysterious to date. And I can say today that we are going to be building this in the open, building this in public. So for everybody who saw some of the sketches of the logo, some of the sketches of the designs, stay tuned for a lot more. We're not going to say just yet what it's all about, but you can think about some of the biggest problems that a lot of people have been facing in crypto. There's getting liquidity on your crypto without selling. Dom made a tweet this morning about some of that.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of things that the banking system currently does not cater to, because crypto and the banking system to date have not really mixed very well. And so I'll say that I mean, Dom might add a little bit more as well. But I wanted to start with that. I just wanted to let everybody know that we're going to be building this more in the open, and we're going to be launching very soon, targeting end of this year, 2025.
You obviously are doing a lot of the hackathons. You've got this one going off here for Stellar, Algorand, even Flare coming up. When is that one? Did that one already? Oh, that one's already gone. So you got
Yeah.
the London hackathon here just in the next few days. Are you doing it while you're there?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So we have Algorand coming up this weekend. We have Stellar coming up very quickly after that in the States. And then we hosted just a big one with Blair,
Okay.
a couple of weeks ago. And they've all been huge, and, so much excitement about people who want to build in the space. And for us, EasyA's goal has always been to
Yeah.
accelerate the adoption of Web3 and crypto infrastructure. And so for us, these big events, it's, really cool occasions to get smart people together to actually build and launch cool products.
Yeah, and I think this is it's very needed right now in the industry in terms of just the alignment of where developers. I was just doing a show this week on the main channel, and you look at the developer ramp. XRPL and Ripple in general are in alignment with most of the blockchains, with the exception of obviously Ethereum. Do you think it's going to be very long before we start to see a lot more developers coming into the XRPL space? How long do you think it will be before we really see a wave of people coming in?
That's a great question. And one of the amazing things that we've seen over the past couple of years is there are a couple of numbers in the EasyA app that we get a first-hand look at before this really starts to translate into more developer activity in terms of applications that are launching. So we saw it, before we had this massive bull run with Solana. We actually saw developers starting to tick up in the EasyA app. We saw that number really start to skyrocket. And I can say that looking in the EasyA app right now, we are at 167,000 builders who have been learning about the XRP Ledger in the EasyA app. So that is absolutely huge. That is the second largest right now, and that's just been steadily ticking up. So that is what we typically see as a leading indicator of when these applications are going to be coming out. So we're anticipating a lot of very, very cool apps starting to come out that we haven't seen anything like this, since first launching the XRP Ledger in the EasyA app. So those numbers have really been ticking up very, very quickly.
Hey, Dom, when you look at the category, we talked a little bit about this on the last podcast, but when you look at the categories that are leading, especially within what you guys are building, is there any one area that you think is going to be like a breakout star in the next year or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you look at different sort of, sectors within the crypto space, I think, stablecoins are huge. And I think the applications that really either, number one, allow people to use stablecoins, make payments, for example, across borders, those are going to be huge. And that's obviously a big focus of Ripple and Stellar and some of the top partners that we work with. I think as well, a big use case of crypto and a big sort of, proven area of demand has been the trading side. So looking at, DEXs, for example, you see a lot of them coming up recently as well. These platforms that actually allow people to seamlessly trade, buy, sell crypto. That's going to be another huge area that I think we're going to see explosive growth in. So I think trading and stable coins are really the two areas that we see as super hot. And obviously we speak to developers and we speak to all these different companies like Ripple and Stellar pretty much every week. And that's a big focus for them too. And I think, this is something that we're obviously very excited to further encourage the adoption of. And obviously, there are different things like social fi, etc. But I think those are still a little bit further down the field and they haven't really sort of, generated the same kind of excitement amongst the broader populace.
Well, it's interesting when you look at where the explosion is happening in DeFi right now. I don't know if you guys caught the news yesterday where Uniswap is now ingesting Solana, which is, I mean, that's a huge move within the ETH ecosystem. Obviously, being able to do swaps there with inside Uniswap, and then you have MetaMask that's now integrating in with Polymarket, which is going to open that order book up. So you've got all this opportunity here starting to go really outside of centralized exchanges. Obviously, we can't really not talk about it, but what did you make of the most recent liquidation issues, the challenge between what we saw with Hyperliquid and what happened with Binance? Do you think this will push the market more into DeFi for trading in the future? We'll start with you, Phil.
It's a really good question. And I think on one level, yes. I think that there's some weird stuff that was happening on centralized exchanges. I think we saw this all over Twitter. Prices had dropped. People had been liquidated, but other people couldn't buy, right? And I think that fundamentally there is weird stuff. Binance also said that they're going to issue hundreds of millions of dollars in refunds. They basically said, look, mea culpa, we messed up. We're gonna try and make amends for that. On the other hand, in terms of how people were actually liquidated, so I think just on that first bit, yes, it's very bullish for DeFi, right? And I think that those sorts of elements are going to push a lot of people out of centralized exchanges, and people are gradually realizing that DeFi is just much, much better. I think there's still a lot of work to be done in DeFi. If you look at some of the most controversial elements in these liquidations, it was the ADL, right? Auto deleveraging, which not many people looked at before and was still relatively opaque, even if you look at Hyperliquid. So, Binance and Hyperliquid, they were closing out these people's levered positions, essentially as sort of like, guys, you've made too much money, kind of. And then they went through and selected, and they had different ways of selecting it, but it was something that not many people had actually looked at before this massive set of liquidations. And so I think there's still a lot of work to be done there.
It's an intriguing thing because obviously we've seen this before from centralized exchanges not behaving well in some of these pressure points. Obviously, this was a catalyst that happened from what we believe. When our research and our sleuths get into it, we believe there was some insider trading going on inside the administration that was pushing into what was going on in terms of these shorts that were being placed over on Hyperliquid. So, I mean, this is the market that we live in, whether you're in traditional finance or you're in crypto or DeFi, it's always going to be there. But man, for it to be out in the open like this was pretty amazing. Dom, when you started to see this happen on Friday night, did you, first of all, were you anticipating the kind of blowback that we saw over the weekend, and to see such a huge liquidation event occur? Did you think it was just going to be kind of a little bit of a blip in the charts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the downside price action really surprised everyone. I think, obviously everyone was, kind of making fun of the fact that Jim Cramer said to buy crypto literally like, the week before it all happened. So I think, some people luckily maybe shorted based on Jim Cramer's advice. But I think, even in terms of our, just the way we're looking at it, I think, obviously it's surprised to the downside. And I think, whenever you have these sorts of downward price action movements, it always, tends to fall a lot further than people think, because people also, retail and even institutions, institutions sometimes get blown out because, they're leveraged, but also, individuals who are leveraged, they get blown out too. And it's sort of, get cascading liquidation, so to speak, all the way down. And then obviously, you typically see like a quick jump back upwards, and then it, kind of stabilizes and maybe, trickles back down. But I think, definitely did surprise to the downside. But, like Phil and I've always been saying, the fundamentals remain very strong. And ultimately, we're really headed much higher, I think, from here.
Sure.
I don't think there's anything really to be worried about. If you're a long-term investor, obviously traders, they'll be moving in and out of positions. But definitely long-term investors shouldn't have anything to worry about, in my opinion.
Let's talk about long-term strategies that are being deployed right now. One of them, of course, that's hitting is this news article right here. Japan is now collaborating to launch a stablecoin. This is going to be pegged to the yen. We're going to see more of this taking place. And just so everybody remembers, Ripple has been very involved with many of the banks in Japan. RLUSD potentially could get a little bit of a lift here. My question to you is, now that we're seeing Japan do this, how long before we start to see this rush, whether it's in the EU, the UK? Obviously, we know what's going on in the UK of them trying to get into a central bank digital currency. But how long before we start to see just a onslaught of stablecoins hitting the market outside of, USDC, Tether, RLUSD, PYUSD? What do you think it's going to look like in the next year? Dom, you want to take it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, individual countries are going to start launching their own. I think, we've already seen China issue its digital currency, Japan obviously doing its own as well. And I think, really when you look at sort of the benefits of having a digital currency, they really outweigh having a fiat currency, especially from a government level. You can issue these digital dollars, digital yen, for example, and you can actually very closely control, what people are doing with it. You can actually, in many cases, even take out the taxes for them. You can also then track where people are going. So, for better or worse, I think these are definitely things that governments will want to use. Whether individuals actually like them or not is a different question. And obviously, then you have to think about, does, a government issued stablecoin really have the same benefits as an independent stablecoin? Probably not. But at the same time, these coins are all going to be issued on the blockchain. And ultimately, this is going to be a huge driver of adoption for crypto generally. So I think, yeah, on the whole, this is a welcome change. And also, I think, the benefits clearly are there for the governments who want to do this. I think, I read something funny actually about in China, they're issuing a digital yuan. And actually, one of the funny things is that they can, deduct things like speeding tickets. If you get a speeding ticket, they can just literally take it out of you, take it out of your wallet for you. So you don't even have to worry about processing it yourself. People might not like that, but at the same time, I think, it's going to have a lot of good synergies for individuals and obviously for the government too, just in terms of admin costs and streamlining processes.
I think you're just on mute.
Yeah, I think you're on mute, Paul.
All right, sorry about that, guys. I had to sneeze.
Sorry.
Phil, I want to pick it up right here. Is there anything that would be surprise you around, you look at what's happening with the Genius Act here in the US. Obviously, we see now with these banks collaborating to launch a stablecoin pegged to the yen. Now we're going to probably see more countries going in this direction. What would surprise you right now? Is there anything you're saying that this would not be on my dance card?
It's a really good question. You know what? I think that we're going to have this massive proliferation of stablecoins. To your point, I think the reality of it is people are seeing how much money Tether is making.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was going to say. Will Tether lose control?
Exactly. Banks can smell it. I don't know whether this is too surprising or not, actually, but I think that there is going to be a multi-stablecoin world. And I'm talking about on multiple different levels. I don't think, even this is surprising because this hasn't been how it's been over the past several years, with Tether absolutely dominating,
right,
and then Circle being a, not a massively close second, but it's basically been dominated by Circle and Tether.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have new stablecoin companies coming up. I think that we're going to have a stratification on multiple different levels. I think that, as you mentioned, we're going to have different currencies, stablecoins. So we're going to have potentially a pound-based stablecoin, a euro stablecoin that's actually gaining a lot of traction, a yen-based stablecoin. But I also think that in terms of the backing, this is something which is going to come and which is going to potentially surprise a lot of people, because stablecoins aren't all created equal. We're going to have those which are backed by fiat, but we're also going to have ones that, to Dom's point, I think that because a lot of governments are getting behind these stablecoins and a lot of big banks, this is precisely what people don't want. People don't want like a JP Morgan stablecoin, unless maybe they're another bank. But even other banks don't want to use JP Morgan stablecoin, right? And so I think that those banks are going to be surprised at how little adoption they're going to get of those stablecoins. I think that people are going to want something that also maybe isn't necessarily backed by fiat itself. This is what a lot of us came into the space in order to avoid. And so I think what you're going to see, and I've been tweeting about this before, I want to see an XRP-backed stablecoin. I want to see crypto-backed stablecoins, which are separate from the current financial system. And I think that this difference is what's going to happen over the next 12 to 24 months. I think we're going to see a lot more experimentation around this. We've seen the revenue models being proven in stablecoins. I think now is where we're going to see a lot of innovation around the different types of stablecoins as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there will be pushback with the banks. I think they will be surprised. However, it is possible that they could get very aggressive in terms of yields and do some, shenanigans around trying to draw people in to kind of support what they're trying to do, at least from a stablecoin strategy. But I think if you've got, an RLUSD or a USDC, or even some, to a certain extent, I think Tether is still going to play a big role in this, especially, but with RLUSD and the connections that Ripple has made along with cross-border settlement, you would think that would almost be the default, that many of these banks and countries, especially around G7, would start to use. I was listening to Howard Lutnick the other day, and he said something that was very intriguing. I'll find the clip if I can. I'll pop it in right here. But he said something that if we couldn't get a company that would gift the United States something in terms of a tech. Did you guys hear this statement that he said? Now, I was thinking Ripplenet. Why wouldn't Ripple just say, hey, yeah, you can use Ripplenet for free, and open that up as a tool for the US government, whether it's for FedNow or other, cross-border settlement requirements, which essentially gives the United States a SWIFT-like product immediately, without development, already deployed, ready to go. What do you think would happen if that were to occur?
I've got to say, I haven't seen the clip myself, but I think it's really a fascinating thing. I think it's something I've been thinking about a lot, because there has been talk about governments having their own blockchains, or even their own their own rails for that. I just do think that when it comes to blockchains, the network effects that you get from being something which is separate from something which is separate from governments, doesn't have, I mean, David Schwartz talks about this a lot, right? The unique nature of XRP, for example, is that it exists without a counterparty. And I think that also when you can have a chain like the XRP Ledger itself, that allows everybody to come in, that allows composability, as a builder myself and a developer myself, I can see the power in that. I'm not so sure that something like that would allow us to have the same sort of fertile ground that we've seen with decentralized networks.
More limitations.
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of companies as well that try and build their own permission blockchains, and they've never really, taken off. They've never really had the adoption that they would like to have seen. So I think, just to echo Phil's, just to agree with Phil, basically.
Well, and it gets into, a lot of the strategies that Ripple has been deploying. I put out a tweet the other day. I'll bring that up. So this I put out on October 15th. Let me share this so the receipts are there for everybody. I put this out on October 15th. And my statement was, Ripple's not playing around. $3 billion invested in acquisitions over the past 2 years. There's Mataco, Standard Custody, Hidden Road, Rail. Right. And then immediately after that, well, I shouldn't say immediately, but on the next day, we start to see a couple of things play out. One was the acquisition of GTreasury. So it was literally the very next day they roll out the GTreasury acquisition, which was, of course, a corporate treasury. This is, I think 13 trillion right now that they were working in, a ridiculous amount of banks and so on in terms of settlement. But how big of an issue do you feel like that is? If you look at Hidden Road as an acquisition, you look at Rail as an acquisition, even Mataco, which is a custody provider. What's Ripple trying to do here?
Well,
hit it, Dom.
Yeah, I mean, I think, at a high level, I think, Ripple really wants to have, the XRP Ledger and sort of, its tentacles really on the whole financial infrastructure that powers the world. So obviously, Hidden Road on the brokerage side, GTreasury just now on the treasury side, Rail as well on the stablecoin side. And I think, once you start to see all of those different pieces come together, that's really where you're going to start to see sort of, the power of what they've been building over the last many years. So I think that's really the goal, it's to make sure that no matter which bit of the financial infrastructure someone is interfacing with, they are ultimately, indirectly, even if they don't know it, touching, an aspect of Ripple's tech. And I think, you see that as well with many of the other companies that have really sort of, taken off in the tech space. A great example is Facebook, which is now obviously called Meta. They
Right.
bought Instagram, then they bought WhatsApp, and then they bought, all these other different companies. And, when you're interacting with Facebook and you think of Meta, many people don't know that, there are actually a whole host of other companies underneath them, like WhatsApp and Instagram. And, these are standalone companies that were then rolled up and actually became much more valuable once they all came together. So
Yeah.
I think that's really sort of the high level structure of what's happening. And ultimately, there's a ton more that maybe Phil wants to touch on as well.
Do you think, Phil, that this plays into a long-term strategy, or do you feel like these are just opportunities that are coming across Ripple's desk and they're like saying, hey, we cannot not buy this company?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't want to say anything that's not public yet, but I think if you from the outside, if you look at Ripple's approach, it's always been different to the traditional sort of, well, I'd say traditional, but
yeah,
the prevailing cypherpunk sort of approach. If you look at the different strands that crypto really started off from, there was Bitcoin, right, which I'd say is more in the cypherpunk tradition. The first post that Jed McCaleb made on Bitcoin Talk was about XRP, or as a better alternative to Bitcoin, right? It was just his idea. And then the whole ethos behind Ripple and where it came from was, look, we need to build on what's come before, right? We're not going to build this all just from nothing. We got to work with the existing financial system. And if you see what Chris Larson talks about as well, he always talks about how there has never been a big technological shift which hasn't built on what's come before. And I think that what you see happening with Ripple is really in that ethos. It's in the ethos that, look, we're going to build on what's happened before. We're going to work together with institutions. And Ripple has been executing that playbook over the past decade. It's been to work with banks rather than to actually try and say, look, we're going to completely put banks aside. We're going to put them out of business, which has been more what other parts of DeFi have done, right? It's going to be like, we'll kill JP Morgan, whereas Ripple has more been, look, we're going to work together with banking institutions. We're going to work together with all these different financial institutions. And so I think that what you're starting to see right now, and what we can, talk to publicly, is we are seeing that there's more of what you're seeing is just this strategy really coming into the fore. And you're starting to see Ripple make big moves to actually capture that and cement what's been building over the past decade.
If you were to look at, and this is all speculation, we're going to be putting out an entire report on this around where we think the next 20 acquisitions will come from, for Ripple. And a couple of the sectors that we're looking at, of course, is banking as a service. This is going to be a big sector that Ripple could also excel in. Then you look at maybe possibly even a Forex, platform. You could also look beyond that and go into really kind of this next evolution of RWA. I mean, there already are partnerships that they have, but tokenization platforms could play into this. Of those three, which one do you think would be the most important for Ripple? Banking as a service.
I think the RWA space.
RWA,
I think the RWA space is going to be huge. I mean, you just look at sort of how much real estate, for example, just one example, how much real estate there is in the world. And, ultimately, I think as well, bringing all of that real estate on chain and allowing people to actually invest on an individual basis is really, really going to be huge. Sort of the next stage of growth for blockchain and for crypto. I think it's something that's only uniquely possible on blockchains, like the XRP Ledger and others. And I think as well, when you look at sort of the demand amongst individuals to buy into real estate and actually buy into these assets that have become so expensive now, you look at, maybe 20, 30 years ago, individuals with a salary could buy a house without any issue. Today, it's practically impossible for anyone who, a recent grad or someone who's, maybe even just been working for a couple of years to buy their own house. And so, people are sort of, very disenfranchised by that. And, I think that's one of the reasons why people have actually, started buying tokens. And it's sort of a way for people to actually invest and make money if they don't necessarily have enough to buy a sort of, an asset like a house. But ultimately, I think, long term as well, bringing those assets on chain allows people to capture the upside of, real estate, for example, as well, and really show people that, they can invest in these assets. And, I think not only tokenizing the assets, but then the cash flows as well is going to be huge. So people can earn yield. And there's so much opportunity on the real estate side. I used to work in the real estate group at Blackstone, which is the biggest owner of real estate in the world. And I think, even back in those days, they were skeptical. But now I'm hearing a lot of the colleagues I used to work with say that they're actually actively exploring tokenizing their funds. Apollo's done it already. I think they did the first ever tokenized fund. And then ultimately, other funds will follow too. So I'm really, really bullish on the RWA space, definitely.
Yeah. So I'll throw the harder question at you, Phil. You're writing checks over at Ripple. Would you buy Securitize? Would you buy Ondo? I'm going shopping here because we would need one of these.
Well, I think we need to look at how these all fit together. I think that if you're building everything organically from scratch, it's one thing, and you can often think, okay, well, we're going to grow out on this. This is where we're seeing demand. I think that when you look at acquisitions, there's one part which is, look, this is a great company, right? But there's others that might not be super synergistic, right? And I think that personally, what I would want to see is I would just want to see businesses that can leverage the XRP Ledger directly. I mean, that's personally my preference. I think that if we look at some of the broader macro level trends that we're seeing, there's one really interesting trend which is just beginning to gain traction, and a couple of funds are putting some of their weight behind it, which is taking legacy businesses and putting them on the blockchain. And I think that there are so many businesses out there that could get massive efficiency gains from running on the XRP Ledger, from using RLUSD for stablecoin payments, from using cross-border transfers. And so I think that what I would just personally like to see, again, without saying putting any words into Ripple's mouth, I would just personally like to see people who are using the XRP Ledger for payments, and potentially even just making getting one of these companies and integrating payments directly into them, and in a way that could actually touch many other companies as well. Right. So Treasury payments is obviously a great example, but also just other companies that process payments. Like maybe you could even look at a lot of people talk about acquiring something like a Revolut, right? Which may be a little bit too big, but something like that would be very cool.
Yeah. Well, you could go into these old remittance networks too, because they have. I mean, what was it? Wise. I think it's Wise, from formerly TransferWise. That was one. And Remitly is out there. I mean, there's quite a few that are working on the old methodology, which I think eventually is going to flip over to blockchain, to your point, within that. But it also kind of flows into my next question, which is going into the digital asset treasuries. The news today, of course, is Ripple Labs is raising $1 billion for a DApp. You look at that. Let me bring up that tweet real quick. But when you see this kind of strategy that's going out there right now, and especially with the DAT craze that's going on, they're leading this. So this is a little bit different. And the design, of course, is to accumulate XRP. I mean, that's $1 billion, guys. Not a bad little move here for an XRP move. But do you think that the digital asset treasuries are the route to take, or do you feel like, to your point, Phil, no, let's go out and acquire companies, because most of these DATs are broken companies, and they're just injecting digital assets into them. Maybe they're building something on it that is unique, that might add some value to it. I mean, maybe there's some yield generation or something of that nature. But which one do you think is better, the DAT play or revitalizing companies into the blockchain?
That's a really good question. I actually don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that what we have seen with the Solana DAT, so Forward Industries, and what Kyle Samani has done there, shows that actually you can have a bit of both. So what they're doing is they are also, at the same time as this being obviously a DAT, acquiring more and more SOL. They're actually going to be trying to put the operations of that, as you refer to it, sort of kind of broken company, or, at least very slow growing company, doesn't have necessarily a massive future ahead of it. What they're doing is they are then trying to integrate it into all aspects of the business to serve as a use case and as an example, a beacon for what can be done. So putting things like payroll on the blockchain, putting things like vendor payments as much as they can all on the blockchain. And so I think that that's actually pretty cool, right? You can show people, look, this public company is running its operations on the blockchain, and this is how you can use it. So it serves as an example. But at the same time, I think that, and we can touch on this a little bit further. I think, the DATs are very, very interesting because you got to think about how they're actually structured, right? The reason that DATs actually work is because of this MNAV premium, right? And so there's been some, great research on this, like Tom Lee over at Fundstrat with his Ethereum DAT, very interesting stuff. He's obviously talked about. Anybody who's watching this can go have a look at some of what he said around it. There's a lot of literature around it, but I think that really you got to look at things like how is this DAT actually structured? How are the funds coming in? All sorts of those things. And I think for me, personally, the most interesting thing is like how can you obviously actually achieve a return that's better than just buying the spot? And I think that's the $1 million question for all of these DATs that are coming out right now.
Well, and okay, so Dom, do you want to add anything on that? Because this is an interesting, challenge I think that we're dealing with right now, the DAT explosion. But we haven't really seen the evolution of a lot of these, these retread companies get reinvigorated, through blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, I think the XRP one is going to be huge because this is the first one that's really focused on buying XRP. We've seen a ton of different Bitcoin ones, like you were saying. Obviously we have strategy, but we have, a ton of other smaller ones that are also just springing up. And I think that space is becoming a little bit saturated. There are quite a few Ethereum ones now as well, like, Phil's mentioned with Tom Lee, etc. And I think the first XRP one is going to be a big hit because it's not only the company that's buying XRP, it's also allowing people in the regular market to get exposure to XRP too on the other side. Obviously, they're buying it, but then because it's a SPAC, because it's going to be traded on the stock exchange, regular stock market investors can then actually buy XRP almost indirectly. And I think that's a big thing as well for investors and retail and also institutions who want to capture that upside and who don't want to buy the underlying token directly or may not otherwise actually be able to. So yeah, I think it's going to be a really, really exciting play.
Well, and the point I think that, Tom, we had a video that we did about Tom Lee and Cathie Wood. Cathie Wood, of course, ARK Invest, now investing and getting exposure to Ethereum via the Bitmine DAT. So you can imagine how funds would start to play into this and compete with some of these XRP ETFs, because the XRP ETF is really the only other vehicle when you look at whether it's Bitwise or Canary, whoever it might be, that comes out with the big winner here. In just a couple of weeks, it's likely we would have one of those ETFs alive. So good timing, I think, here with Ripple going out and trying to build something to kind of take up some of that market. And the interesting point to you guys is that if you get some DAT or company that gets re-engineered on the blockchain, or a DAT that starts to put functionality into the DAT as a revenue generator, so you've got multiple streams of revenue other than just buying the asset and holding it, that gets very interesting very quickly. And I think institutions are intrigued with that, especially if you could plug something like Flare or Axelar, into it for yield generation. So very intriguing. All right, one question I want to get into here, and that is not necessarily on price prediction, but you have this statement right here that is kind of interesting because many people would say, well, okay, well, this acquisition comes in, the price prediction, could this GTreasury deal kind of fuel the next leg up? Obviously, we're in a very tough, I won't say tough market because Bitcoin's still around 110. And of course, it's been slipping overnight, but as we record this, but the market seems still very well intact. Do you think that, and remember, guys, a year ago this time, XRP is under $1. Okay. So that's a significant difference from where we are right now. But what are your thoughts compared to what's happening with Trump's tariffs and this, pseudo possible trade war that might be brewing right now with China? Do you think it's going to have as big of an impact on this next leg of finance, especially in crypto?
Well, I think, obviously trade war and, all this trade uncertainty is definitely not good for the markets. I think in general, the markets and investors, especially the big money, hate uncertainty. So when there's any sort of uncertainty in the markets, they tend to put their money out and put into
Right.
cash or into gold, which is why you've seen, gold
Yep.
rally so much to all-time highs. So that's typically, I guess, the underlying mechanics. And whenever people ask, oh, there's so much bullish news coming out, but why is price not reflecting that? You have to look a little bit bigger picture. And it's not only about sort of, XRP or a particular token in a vacuum. These macroeconomic factors really actually affect the price much more
Right.
than an individual announcement would. Obviously, the whole market reacts in one way. It's very hard for one particular stock or one particular token to really buck the trend, just because that's the way the capital is flowing. And in this case, people are flowing to the so-called safe haven assets, which is obviously cash and gold. So I think that's obviously what's causing the current volatility and current downward pressure. But like I said yesterday on Twitter, all it takes is for that to turn around and then for the trend to resume back
Bingo.
upwards. The fundamentals are getting stronger, not weaker. And so the reason the price is going down isn't because fundamentals have changed and got worse. They've only got better. And I think, for any long-term investor, and obviously this is not financial advice, but for any long-term investor, it's a great time to actually load up on your holdings. And, very similar to the COVID crash, right? And also obviously the previous tariff announcements, which, caused temporary dips. But then obviously, as soon as either a positive headline came out that a trade agreement was reached or that, for example, lockdowns are ending, everything shot back up to the upside much higher than it had ever gone before. So I think that's the way that, most people should see these things. And obviously, if the fundamentals increase, but price is not reflecting that, then, in most worlds and by most methods of judgment, that is a great opportunity.
Well, and I think you have to step back, guys, and understand where the market is right now. I mean, if you look at all the positive nature, it's just, I think that crypto in general sometimes gets inside this bubble. And it's a bubble that is much smaller than the greater market. The greater market is looking at Bitcoin sliding, 10%, 12%. In a Bitcoin world, that's not really much of a move. They're also looking, even at, if you look at XRP, only down a certain amount that doesn't have any kind of indicator that when you look at the critical things that are going to be changing, which is obviously clarity coming through, a lot more, I think, stabilization around tariffs eventually. And then the other component is these Fed rate cuts, which look like pretty much a slam dunk from here on out. So we could see 3 in a row coming in October here in just 2 weeks. We've got one in the beginning of December and then early next year. So this all plays into positive momentum and velocity into the market. So I'm kind of in agreement with you, Dom. You just have to
100%.
end up hodling, through
Yeah,
some of
exactly. 100%. I think, the tariff news and obviously these big headlines always shock people. But I think, again, if you believe the fundamentals have been improving and will continue to improve, then that is, a good opportunity for you.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, we're going to do more of these podcasts. Of course, we've got a whole lineup of great guests. If you guys have a guest out there that you feel should be on this show, just drop a comment either. Or you hit me on X, just at Paul Barron, and DM me over there because that's really kind of the fastest way I can get it into the producers who will reach out. Obviously, we've got Phil and Dom coming in from EasyA and now are a staple of the podcast on your second appearance. So thanks so much, guys, for stopping in today. We appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure to be on. Thanks very much, Paul.
You bet.
Yeah, we had a great time again, Paul. Thanks a lot.
Always fun. You guys know what to do. Hit like and subscribe. Share this out there with somebody in the XRP community or with someone who knows nothing about crypto. Let them understand where this is going because it is really a new shift in, I think, wealth building for the future, especially for you people under the age of 35. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and you get to be right there in the front of it. So great stuff. We'll see you soon.
I made the leap in full time, many years ago and never looked back. So
there you go, my man.
Yeah,
that's
definitely,
the way to go.
Definitely look into it if you haven't, explored crypto.
Catch us later on the XRP pod. Take care.